Now, while it may seem a distant memory for those not directly impacted, 2020 began with the catastrophic Australian bushfires that dominated headlines around the world and devastated many regional communities. As that crisis unfolded, I was very impressed by how our people supported customers, even at a time when many of our staff had themselves been personally impacted. I was equally impressed by how our staff stepped forward to support customers through COVID-19. So on behalf of the bank, I would like to extend our sincerest sympathies to those who have been adversely impacted by either of these tragedies. As we come to the end of a year that none of us could have imagined, I'd like to now provide some insight into how the board is evaluating the future, as well as to make some comments on my priorities as the new incoming chairman. Firstly, the economy appears to be ending the year in better shape than most of us had originally feared. The coordination between the governments, industry and regulators has meant that our customers are in a far better position today than they would have been without these measures. I am, however, a realist. While the signs are positive, we know many businesses are continuing to struggle, and sadly, some may never fully recover. We know there are many individuals who have had an incredibly demanding year despite the considerable support from the governments in Australia and New Zealand. We're also acutely aware that much of this assistance will need to unwind in the early part of next year, understandably, but this may present further economic challenges that will need to be very carefully navigated. Fortunately, the hard work undertaken by management in recent years to simplify and strengthen ANZ meant that we went into this crisis in a strong position. It's also meant that we've been able to support our customers through one of the most difficult periods in generations. Now let me talk briefly about our performance and the dividend. It was, of course, COVID that had the most material impact on our profitability this year. We posted a statutory profit of $3.58 billion, but this was down 40% on last year. I think it's important to provide some perspective, though, on the business trends. On an underlying basis, profit before provisions was down 1% for the year, with both revenue and expenses broadly flat. But quite correctly, international accounting standards now require all banks to put aside provisions for potential future losses. And so this year, reflecting the possible economic impact of the pandemic, you saw each of the major banks setting aside substantial amounts. At ANZ, we set aside a further $1.7 billion, taking our total reserves to more than $5 billion. It's also been a highly unusual year in that it is the first time in ANZ's history that we elected to defer a decision on the dividend as we concluded the first half. While the regulator strongly encouraged all banks and insurers to defer dividend decisions until there was greater clarity, that advice actually reflected the board's own thinking, and our decision ultimately proved to be both appropriate and prudent. Pleasingly, we were able to announce a 25 cents per share dividend, which was paid on the 30th of September, and this was followed by a 35 cents per share distribution, which we've paid to shareholders this morning. Both of these were fully franked. We agreed with APRA that a reduced dividend was prudent in 2020. Moving forward, the board will continue to review our approach in the new year, particularly given an improving economic outlook and APRA's announcement yesterday that it will remove its cap on payout ratios. Ultimately, our final decision as a board will be influenced by how the remainder of the crisis evolves, particularly from a macroeconomic perspective, and our views on the long-term sustainability of our dividends. But let me assure you, your board is acutely aware of the reliance many shareholders place on a regular dividend and on the value of franked dividends. Before getting on to the substance of the meeting, I thought, as a new chairman, I might spend a few moments just saying a few things about where I will focus my attention. Firstly, it's clear that our bank is in a very good position. The strategy that management and the board have executed over the past 5 years has radically simplified the business, significantly improved its capital position, and remediated many of the problems of the past. That's what allowed us to weather the storms of 2020 in good shape, and it means we're well placed to take advantage of the opportunities that a post-pandemic world will offer. One way of thinking about what I see as the focus areas moving forward is to think about it as 4 Cs: customers, costs, capital, and culture. Looking at the first of these, around the world, technology is rapidly changing and improving how companies understand and serve their customers. And to grow your bank sustainably, we must continue to focus on how we can service the customer better. We must continue leveraging technology so we can amplify the voice of the customer in the bank and reduce the friction involved when dealing with us. We want to better anticipate our customers' needs and ultimately make faster and smarter credit decisions. During the next 12 months, you'll hear a lot more from the team about our digital banking offerings, which have been a big focus of our investments. The second C is costs, and banking, like so many industries, will continue to face downward pressure on margins. Whilst ANZ was early to this, and indeed we are regarded as leading the Australian banks in that respect, we must keep relentless pressure on our cost base. The third C is capital, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about this. Efficient capital allocation is the key to sustainably growing shareholder value over time. Over the past 5 years, your bank has been a leader in the management of capital. We have not needed to raise capital by diluting you, our existing shareholders, through the recent COVID crisis. In fact, in contrast to our 3 major Australian bank competitors, we have actually reduced the number of shares on issue over the last few years, increasing the potential earnings per share for you, our owners. Currently, we remain one of the strongest capitalized large banks in the world, with a common equity Tier 1 capital ratio of 11.3%. To put that into even better perspective, that's $34 billion more than what we had the last time we went into a major global crisis, the GFC. However, the response of governments and central banks to the crisis has been to expand money supply with an associated reduction in interest rates. As a result, we believe we will be in an environment of significant liquidity, low interest rates, and intense competition for some time to come. Whilst this will help our customers, it will also require intense focus from the board and management on not only how we manage our capital, but also how we deploy our shareholders' funds. The final and fourth C is culture, and your board understands it has an important role here in ensuring we have the right culture within the bank. We've made good progress here. We have a diverse and experienced management team leading from the front on values. Employee engagement scores are sector leading, and our people are saying they feel empowered to speak up when something isn't right. An ethical decision-making framework is also now being used by leaders across the bank, as well as guiding decisions at our Ethics and Responsible Business Committee. So wrapping up the 4 Cs, let me assure you that my focus as incoming chair will be on improving shareholder returns through a focus on good customer outcomes, cost discipline, the efficient use of capital, while continuing to build a strong culture. Before finishing, I also want to give you the board's perspective on some of the resolutions that are being put to the meeting today. First, let me talk about the adoption of the remuneration report. While Ilana Atlas, the chair of the Human Resources Committee, will talk specifically to our approach, I think it's appropriate that I make some initial comments given the impact COVID has had on our business this year. The board was pleased with the way the bank responded to this global pandemic. From an operational perspective, we took immediate steps to ensure that our people could safely and productively work at home while still supporting customers during a very difficult time. However, as I've said, provisions and impairments relating to the pandemic reduced profits and impacted the amount we were able to return to you, our shareholders, through dividends. So while management did an excellent job, it is important that the impact on shareholders be reflected in the remuneration of our executives. Therefore, the board used its discretion and applied a 50% reduction to the variable remuneration outcomes for our disclosed executives. This reduced the total remuneration by an average of 15% for those that were in the same roles as last year. I should also point out, however, that our frontline staff on award contracts received a 2% pay rise this year, and we think, given their performance through the crisis, that is totally deserved and appropriate. The other resolutions I want to specifically address relate to climate change and to our lending in the natural resources sector. The global economy is clearly making a major transition to a lower carbon future, and our key markets of Australia and New Zealand will be at the forefront of new investment and opportunity that reflects that. We believe at ANZ that we have a role to play as an enabler of a net zero future, and we are already embracing that role. This transition will take time, however, and we appreciate that some shareholders listening today may want us to get there sooner rather than later. Paradoxically, other shareholders feel we may be moving too quickly. As such, we recently released an updated climate change statement which focuses on, firstly, that we will encourage and support our top 100 emitting large corporate customers to identify climate risks and opportunities, create transition plans, and report publicly on their progress. Secondly, that we will support the transition of our economy to a low-carbon future. We've set aside $50 billion to help fund this, and I actually expect that number will likely grow over the next few years. Thirdly, that we will reduce our own impact by managing and reducing emissions from our own operations. This will include sourcing 100% of the electricity needed for our business from renewables by 2025. But probably the most important thing to state is that the heart of our climate strategy is a dialogue with our customers. We want to better understand how they are thinking about this transition and these issues, and how we can assist them to act on these challenges. What's been encouraging so far is that the vast bulk of our customers have welcomed that engagement and are clearly taking these issues seriously. So in conclusion, it's been a very difficult year for many of our customers and for the nation. If 2020 has taught us anything, it is that things can change very fast. The lesson for companies like ANZ is that it's important to be both flexible in planning and agile in response. There will still be challenges ahead, but we have the balance sheet strength, along with record levels of provisions, to ensure we are able to support our customers through the remainder of the crisis, while still providing a decent return for you, our shareholders. Before I hand over to Shane, it would be remiss of me not to make a few comments about my predecessor in the chair role, David Gonski. David retired from the ANZ board at the end of October, having made an enormous contribution to our bank, particularly over the last 7 years as our chair. He steered the board through some testing times for the industry, and he helped build an organisation with a strong focus on governance, accountability, improved culture, and enhanced customer outcomes. There is no doubt, ANZ is in much better shape as a result of his leadership. We are a much simpler and more focused organisation with a strong, diverse and stable management team. We are one of the best capitalised banks in the world without having the need to dilute existing shareholders through the recent crisis. And we have remediated many of the issues of the past while still investing in our future. Perhaps most importantly, his efforts to strengthen and champion the bank's work in the area of environment, social and governance has given us the foundation to be a leader in the industry on sustainability issues. On behalf of all shareholders, I thank David for his efforts. Finally, given the events of 2020, it's reassuring to know we have a workforce of more than 38,000 people who are so dedicated to serving their customers and the community. I'd also like to acknowledge our customers for again trusting us with their banking, and especially thank you, our shareholders, for supporting us through the year. Your support is very much appreciated by the board. Whatever 2021 brings, ANZ enters it with strength, confidence and optimism. And with that, I will now ask our Chief Executive Officer, Shayne Elliott, to address the meeting. Shayne.